Despite constantly being told that we live in an age of freedom of information, there are still occasions when governments act without our knowledge, often in the name of national security, such as tests on new weapon technology like planes, tanks, or even missiles. Our next mystery concerns a strange explosion in a remote area of the Australian outback, which led one man on a 2-year search for the truth. His search took him around the globe, from Washington to Tokyo and Australia. In 1993, the calm of the Australian outback was shattered by an explosion, which registered 3.7 on the Richter scale. Geologist Harry Mason had been working in the region for nearly 30 years. He decided to investigate.
I began to research this, but I had no idea where this was going to go. I mean, I was researching a fireball, an explosion, an earthquake, which we thought was a meteorite impact. This has taken me right around the world. It's gone into a whole new universe of weapon systems and skullduggery and espionage, and I'm afraid the data is tending more and more towards these horrific new weapons of war, which unfortunately most people on the planet don't know exist, and I think it's high time people did know they exist.
So what had happened?
Earthquakes are non-existent in this part of the goldfields. It hasn't had any in Aboriginal memory or in seismic recorder memory since 1900. So got pretty excited about this. This was going to be a fantastic thing to research. I decided that what was necessary was to get out there in the field to hunt down any eyewitnesses, and we're talking a very large area, so that was not easy. But I finally got lucky and located a number of Aboriginal witnesses who had seen this whole thing from start to finish.
Alright, that's mine.
What he saw was a sort of a light coming from the west, went straight over the top of us. There's a whistling noise with it, just a big bang and lit everything up. Most of them all thought it was the end of the world.
What's going on? We heard a bang and the earth sort of shook.
We had eyewitness reports of a fireball flying through the sky. There was a huge flash of light and a massive earth tremor. Now, it seemed pretty reasonable that a very large chunk of rock had flown in from space and impacted on the ground, and that this had caused the earthquake, and that was the end of the story.
From combining all the evidence, Harry pinpointed the location of the explosion to a remote sheep station, where he found another witness.
One night I was laying in bed, and next minute this thing started coming over from the south, and it's hit the ground and made a bang, and it's left the light right up in the sky and stayed there for hours.
Now, the clincher really is Kelman's evidence for when this thing ended. It turned off as if someone threw a light switch. One moment it was there, the next moment it wasn't. And you're starting to really wonder, this is one hell of a strange kind of meteorite. If it was a meteorite at all. One way of solving this argument was to actually go out there and find an impact crater. We calculated there should have been a crater of the order of about 100 metres in diameter, and we should have had a significant blast damage area, and we couldn't find it.
The area Harry was looking into was Banjawan Station. This remote sheep station had belonged to the Om Shinrikyo, a Japanese religious cult held responsible for the terrorist nerve gas attack in the Tokyo subway in 1995, which killed 12 people and injured thousands.
Banjawan Station had been purchased by the Japanese Aum cult. Then I heard how the Aum had attempted to purchase nuclear weapons from the Russians and were thought to have attempted to make their own. Well, we started to put all this together and we didn't like what we were seeing. In fact, we seriously began to wonder if they hadn't detonated a small nuclear device somewhere on Banjawan Station. Unproven, but sufficient evidence to suggest someone better have a look at this quick, because maybe that's what we're dealing with.
Is that the US Senate?
There was sort of a hushed silence at the other end. I knew I'd hit something. It was like, oh Christ, please send everything you've got right now.
The US Senate had been investigating the Om's activities ever since the Tokyo subway attack.
What we know about the Ohm indicates that they could, if they put their mind to it and their efforts to it, could develop weapons of mass destruction. The significance of the Tokyo gas attack was that this was no longer a hypothetical threat. The Ohm Shinrikyo was the first group that used chemical weapons on an innocent civilian population. The genie was finally out of the bottle. They killed people, and they were trying to kill hundreds of thousands of people. In October '95, we were contacted by an individual who brought to our attention the fact that there was a mysterious explosion that occurred at or near where the Ohm had operated. Normally my reaction to an incident like this would have been deep skepticism, but because the Ohm did things that a year or two before I would have thought was total fiction, I had to take it seriously.
The Senate hired top seismologists to investigate Harry's report.
We were able to determine that it wasn't a nuclear weapons test based on the signature, the characteristics of the seismic signal. And the signature seemed to be more similar to that of an earthquake rather than that of an explosion. The problem with that is we don't normally associate earthquakes with objects flying through the sky, loud noises, and bright flashes of light that light up the night. After analyzing the satellite images, well, we haven't found any smoking gun. There's no obvious crater there with a smoldering meteorite. And so if the eyewitness accounts are credible, and it's not a meteorite impact, and it's not an earthquake, then what is it?
The Ohm were interested in some very strange and bizarre weaponry, some of which was science fiction, but with the Ohm, the difficulty was that science fiction and reality were very much mixed. That made them so interesting and also so scary.
The Senate had discovered that the Ohm were interested in the work of a scientific pioneer called Tesla.
Tesla, you say? Right. No, I'm with you.
Well, instant red flag went up here because, as it happens, I'm a bit of a Tesla buff. I have a lot of Tesla's books and books about Tesla. And I remembered that somewhere in there was some data about creating earthquakes.
Tesla had developed a theory, although not proven, of making earthquake machines or weapons that would cause earthquakes through alternating waves and currents.
What he's saying is I can flick a switch and I can create an explosion anywhere on the other side of the planet which you can't defend against. And that explosion is of the same order of magnitude as a nuclear blast.
Could this have been an intentionally manufactured earthquake? I don't know of any way of remotely triggering earthquakes. There is certainly no credible scientific or geophysical mechanism for remotely generating earthquakes. At this point, a scenario like that would still be science fiction.
2 years after he started his investigation, Harry still feels he hasn't found the answer.
I'm quite prepared to be wrong. Let's look at the various scenarios that may be involved here. Meteorite impact. Problem, no crater. Earthquake, fine, but there's a problem. How do we explain the moving fireball and the huge explosion? I'm the only person who's actually taken the trouble to go out to Banjuan, interview the witnesses and gather the evidence. And I am convinced that there is something far more sinister has happened out there and is happening in the Australian outback.
These are the only traces left of the Ohm's occupation of Banjuan Station. Their leaders are now on trial, but in spite of this, John Sopko believes that the mysterious events in Australia might signal the nature of terrorism of the future.
The Ohm Shinrikyo itself is no longer a threat. The Japanese authorities have effectively eliminated that threat by arresting hundreds of individuals, seizing their assets, and putting on trial all of their major leaders. What still is a threat is an Ohm-like group that could be anywhere. It could be in England, it could be in Australia, it could be in the United States. And it may not be led by a semi-blind Buddhist acupuncturist. It could be anyone who could do it. Because now weapons of mass destruction can be made by an individual in their bathtub and can be used. And so the motive of individuals and the potential for their use is out there.